Good morning everyone. We're going to be doing something a little bit different from anything we've done before so far, which is what I like to do each week, just to keep you on your toes. This is going to be looking at acrylics and building it up in unusual ways to make it much more abstract and texturized. In the process, you can kind of really abstract if you want to, or you can make it more realistic if you want to. It's very much open to interpretation. So first thing you're going to need is your piece of paper. This is a piece of 240 GSM cartridge paper that I have primed with a bright pink acrylic layer. This pink layer was mixed by crimson with white and then applied evenly, given 24 hours to dry before I did any painting on top. Then you're going to need your reference image. You can see here I've been using the references by Burst, all royalty free on Pexels. The link will be below if you want to have a go. You're going to need some acrylics. So I have got crimson, cadmium red, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow, cobalt blue, lemon yellow, black and rather a lot of white, which is always the way with doing this type of project. The other thing you're going to need is a few different brushes. So I've got some smaller brushes, much more traditional, and I have some bigger brushes that I've used for this project, as you'll see as we go through it. The other thing I would recommend obviously is a pot of water. You might be wise having a bigger pot than I have, because it's a nightmare cleaning these big brushes in the little pots. Keep going out to the sink, so get a decent sized jam jar if you've got a big brush that you're going to use. The other thing that you're probably looking at using in this type of technique is one of these. So this is just a gift card, one of those plastic cards you can pick up and load money onto for Christmas or birthday presents. I've got a pair of scissors and I have cut a chunk off after using it as a whole. So don't cut it until you've used it to get the big areas down, which you'll see in a little while. The other thing that you can use is cardboard. Now it does have to be quite stiff cardboard, so do keep that in mind. You will get a slightly different effect when applying the paint. I would highly recommend having a decent amount of kitchen roll or tissue on you, because you need to constantly be cleaning everything so that you don't get cross contamination. Right, so first things first, we've got to get the drawing down. Let's get to it. So the first stage of doing this project is first of all creating a very soft toned pink. You can see here I've just mixed crimson red with some white, and then I've used my card to smooth it all over. It's not an even coverage, it's a little bit patchy, but that doesn't matter. It's going to be sitting underneath the colours and occasionally poking out to give it a little bit of a visual sappy va-va-voom, if you know what I mean. So once you've got that down, and that's dry, it has to be dry before you can move on to the next stage, you need to get a few colours out on your palette. I'm going to have two palettes on the go here. This is just my drawing palette, so you can see it's a piece of recycled plastic from shopping. I've put out some yellow ochre, some cadmium red and some ultramarine blue, and I have my water there. I've also got my brush, which I'm going to be drawing in. Now I'm going to draw in a flat-headed brush because I kind of prefer drawing in that. If you want to, you can do a pointed head brush. It's just completely personal preference. I've got my reference image over here that I'm going to start working up on. So let's mix up a soft browny tone to get us going, shall we? If I take some of the yellow ochre, add in a bit of the cadmium red so that it goes pinky. Then I'm going to add in a little bit of ultramarine blue, and that should make it go brown. But it should be a fairly soft tone of brown. You shouldn't be too hard, because you need to be able to cover over the top of this brown. Go around. If you find that the paint is too thick, then you can add a little bit of water. Dilute it down. Now, obviously, you should always take your picture. If you're using a reference image, go across the paper and check your aspect ratio. So if you put it down in the bottom right hand corner, and I'm going to be marking mine out, so you can see that I'm putting mine down here. This is going to be the bottom corner. Then you run a ruler from this bottom right hand corner through to the top corner of the reference image, and that will show you where the top of your picture should be. So I'm going to then take that, and because my brush is a bit long, so if I just quickly grab a different brush which has got a shorter handle, I can hold that on the end and use the top of the paper to give me a rough idea of where the top of my picture should be. If you do not do this, you will find that you end up stretching the image slightly. So it is always wise to have a rough idea of the size, well, the aspect ratio of your reference image. I'm going to put in a corner point there. And a corner point here, which means it should be there and there. Put that back in. Now I'm going to mix up a little bit more paint because I got through that quicker than I anticipated. So let's grab a little bit more, and it doesn't matter if it's not the same perfect shade. It's just a base colour that you're going to draw in. Then I'm going to take my reference image and I'm going to start working out some things. So first of all, I'm going to take my reference image, and from this corner to the edge of the reference image, I'm going to fold in half. It's not the most clearest cut half, but it'll do. And put some paint on it so it's nice and clear. Now that means that halfway along the bottom of my picture, and I'm doing this by eye, you can always use a ruler. That point should be that point in the reference image. So let's just grab that point, roughly there, it's top. And then you do the other direction as well. Fold that vertically, and I put in a little bit of paint there. Then I look at my halfway point, which is going to be about there, and I am just doing my by eye. It's going to be about there. Okay, that means the centre is here, because I'm just looking at that and that. And of course the centre I can see, because of the folds, is there. So I've got my crosshair. Now that gives me a guide of how big things are. Because you've got various planes here and perspective going on, planes of depth, you need to get the scales correct. For instance, a telephone box needs to be very big because it's closer to the viewer, while the buildings actually look quite small because they're further away. Now the first step usually when dealing with any perspective isn't to put in a line, a horizon line, which is not easy to see here. If you look at the horizon line, generally it's going to be where the buildings are sitting on the floor, which is slightly below the halfway point. Maybe around there. On the picture, around there. Then I can look at putting in this telephone box, and I'm looking at the amount of space I've got here. So we've got a telephone box kind of coming in around here, and it's going nearly to the top, but there's a little bit of a gap. Just like that. So I can put that in. My nice big telephone box is going to be sitting in here. Then I've got my pavement coming down because I'm starting to get that perspective. So if we look at the pavement, it's kind of disappearing into here. You can see it around there. And that's going to be coming to around there. Can you see it falling off the edge of the reference image just here? If we join them back together, you get roughly the right kind of angle. You've got then the pavement, which is here. That's about halfway, so it's about a quarter upside of the paper. And then that will lead me through to where my taxi is. Can you see that yellow taxi? So I'm going to have a yellow taxi around here. And the taxi will show a little bit of the bus. So I'm going to bring that back, so I get that in. My bus is going to go up here, and my bus goes over that halfway point. It's around there. Then the bus comes back, and I'm looking at this point. So if that's half, it's slightly more to the right, isn't it? If we divided this part of the picture in half, which is about there, it's going to be a little bit more to the right for my bus. Then I've got my taxi. It's going to be sitting in here, and I'm not worried about shapes being perfect or anything like it. Just looking at position and scales that are coming in. That's all we're dealing with at this stage. Getting things in the right place. Because we don't want to invest loads of time and energy getting a really lovely drawing down, and then things are either too big or too small and it doesn't fit, and we have to start moving everything around, and you've wasted all that time painting it. So we'll get that in around here, that black car sitting in, and then there's some more cars just sitting up here, isn't there? The traffic going around here. We've got that large bollard which is sitting more to the right of that back one. It's going to be around there. And then we've got another bollard, it's quite big sitting there, and then we've got lots of little ones going up towards the distance. We've got a bollard that's sitting into the wheel of the yellow taxi, and we've got another bollard that's coming up on the end, and that's hitting kind of the centre of the taxi up there. So we've got that bare bones down. Now let's get some building in. So that's our halfway point. The edge of the halfway point up this reference image is basically the edge of that building. So we know that we're going to have that building sitting in around there. That's going to be coming in there. Now as soon as I put that in, I've got a feeling that my telephone box is maybe a little bit too wide. So I'm going to knock that back. And this is precisely what I'm saying, because drawing is all about guessing. You make some guesses and then you start fixing them and getting them closer to the reality. Okay, so everything is a guess at this stage. Be willing to fix it and play around with it. Then I'm going to get this building here. So we've got that building coming into the bus. So that's about the halfway bus. If you look at the bus, if that's, yeah, it's about nearly half that width, just slightly left of it. We've got the building coming up here, and you get a little bit of perspective going on the side of that building. Then you've got another building coming down here. There's a building just at the end of the bus. You can see that going through like so, which has a roof which makes it higher than the bus. And a little bit kind of that point on the end there. That comes into that. We've got a little bit kind of coming up and into the side there. And generally, you can see there, we've got the bare bones, haven't we? The big structures. We're looking at getting the big forms in first. Now, let's just tidy up this telephone box. So, constantly remixing my drawing paint. Trying to keep it fairly light so that once I put more colours over the top, I can cover up anything I want to. I'll get that in, and I'm just looking like that's the halfway point. So I need that red section's got to come up higher, and that probably needs to come down a little bit lower. Then I'm going to have the doors sitting in here. There's quite a few lines, I'm not too worried about that. I'm just looking at this kind of drop and where the windows are going to start. Getting those in roughly. Now it's always good to count things, so like the bollards and the windows, and get the right amount. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and a bit left on the bottom. And that just really reinforces that you've got everything in the right place. That means that that's going to have the crown section, and then we're going to end up with all that detail bit at the top. I need to bring that down a little bit just to give myself some room. There you go. And you should end up with something that looks like this. So at the moment, it reminds me a lot of a Lowry kind of painting. Then we need to come in and start fine tuning it. So I'm going to get a little bit more of a stronger, darker colour by adding a little bit more blue in my mix. Okay. And I'm going to start getting a little bit more accurate with the shapes I want to represent in this part of the drawing. So I can start looking at getting my car sorted down here. In there. And obviously they probably prefer having some wheels if you've got a car. It's always a good idea. Now this is still very rough. Don't be aiming to do too tight a drawing, okay? Let's get some windows in for the bus. Okay. I'm going to put people in it as well. So let's just grab a little bit more paint. And we've got that person. Well, we've got a lamp post, haven't we, that comes all the way up the side of the building, around there. And there's a person just disappearing behind the phone box, which could be around there. Right, so we've got the bare bones. Now we need to use our big brushes and get some base colour down. So what we're looking at doing for the next stage is to block in some areas. Now you can do this in various different ways if you want to. You can see here that I have got some brushes, a large, a medium and a small flat-headed brush that I'm going to be using with this project. The other thing that I would recommend, these are like the voucher cards. You can see there that you can load vouchers on, or you can use a bit of corrugated cardboard as well, which you can cut down into different sizes. So they give you flexible sizes that you want to generate. So when doing this style of work, you're looking at putting in a base colour in the background. The best way of doing this is having quite a large brush, unless you've got a small piece of paper. It's all proportionate. I've taken over here a Stay Wet palette and added in some colours that I thought were particularly good for this type of work. You can see I've got a large amount of white, yellow ochre, cadmium red, crimson red, then there's some cadmium yellow. I'm looking at mixing these and putting in a base colour for each section. Now I might start off with this big brush because you can see I could work that in various areas. Okay, I am looking at using brush marks which are vertical or horizontal. Okay, that way you'll get like quite a boxy appearance. I might find for certain areas of the picture I need to change my brush size, so maybe for these taxis I need to come down to something smaller, just like that. So let's start off with a big brush, shall we? And because I don't want to lean on it, I'm going to start up here and work down across the picture. I'm going to take some white and make sure I get a decent quantity on my brush. I'm going to add in a little bit of yellow ochre to make it creamy, because white in its own right is going to be too harsh, and that's going to be used for extreme highlights, so we don't want anything pure white at this stage. Then I'm going to start working in some of these buildings up here. Now I am going to make this more grey, but at the moment I just want this creamy layer. I might also leave areas of pink to come through to give it a little bit more of a zappy approach. I'm going to put that brush to one side and just go down a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make this a little bit more pinky cream. Let's add some white into that. Now I'm going to wash the brush off and then get some white and just fill in this background sky up there, which is really sharp. Okay, so let's grab a little bit of red and get our telephone box added in. Now for this type of red, I usually end up mixing a little bit of crimson with cadmium. A nice balance of the two. Let's grab a little bit of white, get a little bit of pink, just going up over this part. And a few other little bits of highlights that might kind of be nice later on. Going in there. And then we need to create those dark tones for the shadows. So if you get some ultramarine blue, and then use a little bit of crimson, you get a nice dark purpley tone, which will look quite nice for this. Now this brush is a bit too big, so I'm just going to downsize. clean our brushes and then just work on these bits up here now. Right, so if we get a smaller brush, and I'm going to put that yellow taxi in. I'm going to add a little bit of white into there, make it nice and bright so it pops. And the trick is always about using the brush strokes in the most minimal way as possible to represent the form. Right, so now it's a little bit dry. There's some patchy bits where the figure paint is, but I'm going to go in with a card. So I've got just one of these kind of gift vouchery plasticky cards, and I've also got some cardboard, and I'm going to cut them down as well. So first of all, I'm going to just do some colouring, and I'm going to start off using some of the red because I just fancy doing some of the red, and putting that in there, just like so. And I can build in a little bit more, and because it's a flat line I can get really nice straight lines with it. So I could pick up some white, taking the card and I'm running it along, so I've got white along the bottom, which means I can get that kind of line effect, which is rather nice. Also just playing about with it. So let's get some more red and work this up. If you watch cross contamination, you can see I can get a little bit of cream on the bottom there by accident, which I don't want, so I'm getting a tissue and I'm removing that off. I'm then going to start bringing in some red lines. You might find that you need to constantly top it up to do this. So I put in a little bit of red, then I'm going to take some blue and make like a shadowy tone. So if I take a little bit of cadmium, and you can use a brush if you want to mix your colours. It's completely up to you if you want to use the card or the brush. And I've got a little bit of that going on down here on the palette. Grab a little bit more, a little bit plummy, and then I can put in these shadow sections. Any patination that I might want, so you can see like you get the patination on the side of the telephone box. And then bring that down, and you could drape it just like I did on the other ones, or you could press it. There's no absolute way that you have to do it. Okay, and then start building up some shadows into other areas really, and just messing about with it. You can take your card and some scissors and you can cut it if you're finding that it's too big. I can put that one up there, and if I want something smaller, just like I'm doing here, or I might just want to take this and scrape into the wet paint that I've got, building up a little bit more tone, because the tone will make it look three-dimensional. So, I'll build that up in other places just around the picture, like I've done there. And you'll probably want different purples and different greys. Just work into it. You might find some areas you want just a slightly grey tone. You could pick up some of that grey, or you can make that grey a little bit darker, and start working in the areas. You can see there it's starting to build up. It's just playing around and moving paint around and being quite free and loose with it. The other way you can do it, so apart from using something smaller, your cards in different ways, you can use a stiff piece of cardboard. This is corrugated cardboard, so it's going to give you a different effect. If I say I want to lighten this a bit more while it's wet, I'm going to get the cardboard and I kind of get lines going into the application, so you get a very different mark which you're building up. Now it's just literally playing with it and finding your feet and getting what works for you. Okay, so I'm going to grab some corrugated, and I've got like the trees coming in, coming up around here. So there's a lot of aerial, atmospheric perspective in a picture like this. This means that your colours should get faded out further away from the person. Well, the person looking at the picture can see. They should also become a little bit more fuzzy around the edge of the application. But be careful of going too dark in buildings that you want to look far away. A lot of the trick with something like this is to take your time and build it up gradually. Blues and purples will make things look further away as well. So if you do want to add a little bit of an illusion of distance, look at changing your colours towards more of that bluey purple spectrum, and it will automatically appear like it's further away. Everything in this type of painting is about putting the light and darks in and trying to get them as accurate as you can. If you spend time just getting those right, you'll be fine. It is quite demanding though on complex pictures like this, so do take your time and don't rush. And by using the card as well, you'll find that your paint application will become a little bit thicker than normal. So it gives it a whole different dimension. The other thing you can do is you can lay things down and then you can scrape them across. Always make sure you're cleaning it in between. So with this, if I scrape it now, I'm going to get some of that layer from underneath coming through, and you get some gorgeous tactile effects by doing it and building up shades that look really powerful. Now the other trick is obviously looking at where your highlights are and kind of a little bit of exaggeration. So I'm putting this white on the roof of the taxi, and then that white is going to go down onto the bonnet of the car. Exaggerate that. And if you find that you've put too much down, wipe your card off and then you can scratch it to remove some. You can also use some tissue to lift some off as well. So it's up to you. And because the paint's so thick, you can always scratch into it as well to give it a whole different dimension. Now I've got to get that white headlight in. So let's bring that in there, using the corner of the card. And I've got one over here. I better get them level, aren't I? Or that's going to look really strange. Like so. And then, you know, if you want to, you can take that corner of the card and you can see the card behind. So putting in a little bit there for the highlight of that car. And kind of just working it over. And you can do this with any of the colours if you want to. So the red bus I did this for, and that's worked out really nicely. If you find you've got a little bit too much, just take a tissue and smooth it down. You can, if you want it to make a little bit more finer, take a brush. I'm going to make a darker grey for that car behind. I'm going to brush in some detail. Keeping it very simple with the brushwork. And then once I've put the brush in, I can then use the card to scratch that across and get a whole different type of textural mark. It's like a little bit of grey on the roof. Let's scratch that in around. It's about playing around with mark making and experimenting. So this is a nice little project which really explores mark making and experimentation plus risk taking. With all abstract painting, it's generally about looking at textures and colours and tones and building atmosphere that provokes a sense of place. I hope you've had fun. Don't feel like you're restricted by just using the card like I did. You can use anything you want to experiment with the different types of marks and applications of the paint, building up texture and atmosphere within your artworks. Go and have a go. Be fearless, and I'll see you next time around. Bye everyone.